My son broke my old camera, calling it junk. The sound of it crashing to the floor echoed through the quiet house. He didn't even notice the hidden memory card inside the film slot. I said nothing. I didn't move. I let him believe he had the last laugh, that he had rid me of something useless, that he had won. Little did he know. The real power was just beginning to stir quietly. Like a shadow moving through a room he thought he owned. I picked up the camera. Deliberately, slowly, as if it were no more than an object. Yet every movement was calculated. That little memory card, tucked inside the camera, held more than just images. It held truths he had never wanted to face, secrets he thought were buried, and proof of everything he had taken for granted, ignored, or dismissed. I placed it in the laptop carefully, pressing play, and I felt a quiet thrill, one that had nothing to do with anger or hatred. It was satisfaction, slow and deliberate, the kind that comes from knowing the storm is about to strike someone who deserves it. The footage revealed every careless moment, every instance of arrogance, every word spoken in arrogance or disrespect. Each clip reminded me of the way he had treated friends, co-workers, and even me. All the things he believed were private, all the moments he thought went unnoticed, were now exposed, playing out on the screen in a silent, undeniable testimony. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I let the truth speak for itself. I thought back over the years, to the small things that had built this storm. How many times he had dismissed my advice. How often had he believed that he was cleverer, stronger, better than everyone else? How many times had I stood by, quietly watching, waiting for him to learn the consequences of his arrogance? Now, everything was aligned perfectly. 20 minutes. That was all the time it would take. The pieces were in place, and the moment of reckoning was imminent. I made a single call to someone I trusted, someone who understood the delicacy required for what was about to unfold. There were no words exchanged, only a subtle understanding. In 20 minutes, the chain of events I had orchestrated would begin. Ethan, who had thought himself untouchable, would find out that even the smallest oversight could destroy his certainty. Even the smallest act of carelessness could set in motion forces he could not control. I sat back, letting the quiet hum of the laptop fill the room. The sun had dipped lower, casting long, stretching shadows across the hardwood floor. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. I let the silence grow, letting it sink into the corners of the house, knowing he would soon sense that something was different. He would feel it in the air, but he would not know what it was. He never would until it was too late. Ethan returned to the room, unaware that his entire world was about to change. I let him wander, let him speak casually, pretending everything was normal. I did not rush him. I let him feel the tension in the room, a quiet unease he couldn't place. I let the seconds stretch, counting them silently, knowing that each passing moment brought him closer to the revelation he had never expected. "Hey, Ethan," I said finally. My voice calm and steady, carrying no anger, only a quiet authority. "Did you enjoy my old camera today?" He laughed, brushing it off, trying to hide the small flicker of unease that had crossed his expression. "It's still junk, Dad. Honestly, why do you even care about that old thing?" I said nothing. I let the silence speak, heavy and deliberate. I watched him fidget, saw the way he shifted uncomfortably, the slight hesitation in his steps. He had no idea that the moment that would change everything was coming, that the truth he ignored for so long had been patiently waiting for him all these years. I thought about the lessons he had ignored, about the arrogance he carried like armor, about the years of disrespect and indifference, about the many times he had underestimated me, believed I had nothing left to offer, believed I had no influence over the events he so carelessly set in motion. And now finally he would see that nothing goes unnoticed, that the smallest actions have consequences, and that those who act carelessly are always caught off guard by the ripple of what they leave behind. I leaned back in my chair, letting my hands rest lightly on the edge of the desk, letting the anticipation build. The quiet satisfaction was deeper than anger. The revenge was not in yelling, not in confrontation. It was in precision, in timing, in allowing the truth to unfold on its own. 20 minutes. That was all. 20 minutes before Ethan would beg. 20 minutes before he would realize the consequences of calling something junk, of dismissing what he did not understand, of underestimating me. And when the time came, he would not know how to react. He would not know what hit him. Every careless word, every arrogant gesture, every moment of disdain he had carried for years would come back to him. Undeniable and irreversible. I let him move through the house thinking it was all ordinary. I let him check his phone, speak to friends, continue in the arrogance he believed was untouchable. I let him believe he had control. Because the moment he realized he did not, that moment would be the most powerful lesson of all. I watched him leave the room briefly, and I sat there, silent, calm, waiting. The storm was coming. It had been carefully set, meticulously planned, and now all that remained was to watch it unfold. He would plead. He would beg. And he would understand too late that calling something junk can have consequences far greater than the simple act itself. And then, when he returned, nothing would be the same. 20 minutes had passed. Ethan had no idea what was coming. He wandered back into the living room, his casual confidence still intact, believing the world revolved around him, that I had no leverage, no plan, no power to surprise him. He didn't see it coming. He never does. I watched him, calm, unmoving, letting the quiet anticipation hang between us. The memory card sat in the laptop, the contents ready to change everything he thought he knew. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. He fidgeted, shifting on the couch, trying to look relaxed, trying to pretend everything was normal. Every movement he made was recorded in my mind. Every careless gesture stored like data I could retrieve at any moment. He laughed nervously, glancing at the laptop without realizing why I had it open, why my attention had settled on it. He believed I was still harmless, still the old man who had no influence over his life, who could do nothing more than let him mock my belongings, insult me or ignore me. Then I called again softly, discreetly, into the phone. I didn't speak my intent aloud. There was no need. The arrangement had been made weeks ago. A few words were enough. By the time Ethan realized it, it would be too late. And as I hung up, a strange, almost imperceptible shift entered the room. The calm air, which had felt normal moments ago, now carried tension, a charged energy that even Ethan began to sense. He looked at me, suspicion creeping into his eyes, though he didn't know why. I pressed play on the laptop. The footage began. At first, Ethan didn't recognize the significance. Just images, just scenes of him at different moments. But slowly, the weight of realization hit him. Faces of people he had mocked, moments of arrogance, careless private conversations, all laid bare. He froze. He tried to turn away, tried to laugh it off, but the images kept playing, undeniable, relentless. And as the scenes unfolded, I saw his composure crack. The arrogance that had shielded him for so long was melting away, replaced by shock, disbelief, and creeping dread. He started, voice shaking, but I didn't respond. I let the silence do its work. He could barely form words, couldn't find a defense, couldn't stop the feeling that something he had ignored, dismissed, and underestimated was now consuming him. Every smug gesture, every careless laugh, every moment he thought himself untouchable was now reflected back at him. And I watched patiently, silently, as the tension grew. I heard him mutter fragments, apologies that didn't reach my ears fully. He began pacing, nervous energy radiating off him in a way that made the room seem smaller, the walls pressing in. He glanced at the laptop again and again, his face paling with each passing second. By now, the consequences were no longer abstract. They were immediate. The people he had hurt, the arrogance he had carried, the moments he thought no one noticed, they were all there, frozen, undeniable. His hands trembled, his voice shook, and he began to understand for the first time that the so-called old man he had mocked had quietly orchestrated a reckoning that he could not escape. I spoke. Softly, deliberately, letting each word land like a weight on him. You thought I had nothing left to show you, Ethan. You thought I was powerless. But you see, everything is in motion now. He froze mid-step, turning toward me with wide eyes, the arrogance drained from his posture, replaced by fear and confusion. He wanted to deny it, wanted to make excuses, wanted to reclaim some sense of control, but he couldn't. Not anymore. The truth had revealed itself, and with it, his helplessness. And then it happened. A subtle knock at the door, a soft sound, almost casual, but it carried authority. Ethan turned, startled, and that moment broke the last of his composure. Two men entered, quietly, purposefully. The kind of people who could make impossible things happen. The kind of people who understand consequences without explanation. Ethan's gaze darted back to the laptop, then to me, then at the men standing silently. Panic began to creep in, crawling along his nerves, coiling tight in his chest. He took a step back, then another. Words formed, but he couldn't speak them fast enough. I don't. Dad, please, you can't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence, the inevitability, the undeniable proof on that memory card, and the presence of those men all combined to leave him exposed, powerless, and completely vulnerable. He was finally beginning to understand. The so-called junk camera was not junk at all. It had been the tool for his reckoning. Every moment he had dismissed, every slight he had inflicted, every arrogance he had carried, now all returned to him. Multiplied, undeniable, and unescapable. I watched him stagger, trying to collect himself, trying to hide his fear, but failing with every breath. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. I had not shouted, I had not acted rashly. And yet here he was, undone, humbled, exposed in ways he could not anticipate. No longer in control of his life or the narrative he had tried to dominate for so long. And as I observed him, silently, I knew this was only the beginning. The lesson had started, but it would continue until he understood exactly what underestimating me had cost him. His arrogance, his entitlement, his belief that he could treat me as powerless, all of it was about to be tested, pushed to the limit, and then he would beg. 20 minutes ago, he broke my camera. Now in less than an hour, the consequences of that single careless act would reach a point where nothing could reverse them. The stage was set. The players were in place. And Ethan, my son, was about to realize that calling something junk can set events in motion that no one, not even him, can control. By now, Ethan's panic had begun to overwhelm him. He paced back and forth, glancing at the laptop again and again, at the memory card, at me, at the two men quietly standing in the corner, ready to act. His voice wavered, trembling with disbelief, anger, and growing fear. He tried to speak, to justify himself, to argue, to regain control, but no words could stop the tide that had begun. Every word he uttered sounded hollow, meaningless, even to himself. "You can't do this, Dad. This isn't fair," he stammered, his hands shaking slightly, betraying the composure he had tried so desperately to maintain. I didn't respond. I let him talk, letting his words fill the room, letting his frantic energy echo against the walls, while the truth remained silent and undeniable on the screen before him. I let the tension grow, letting him feel the weight of his actions, letting him grasp the consequences that had been waiting patiently for him all along. The footage played relentlessly, showing moments he had thought trivial, private, meaningless. Moments where he had mocked friends, belittled colleagues, dismissed family members. Every arrogant gesture, every careless word, every thoughtless action he had taken for granted was now magnified, undeniable, and permanent. The realization began to set in, and I could see it reflected in his eyes. The arrogance he had worn like armor had dissolved, replaced by fear, guilt, and helplessness. He tried to turn away from the laptop, but he couldn't. His own reflection stared back at him from the screen. Every smug smile, every careless laugh, every dismissive gesture came rushing back, confronting him, exposing him to a reality he had refused to see. He tried to defend himself, tried to convince me, tried to plead with me to stop, but it was too late. The momentum of the plan had already begun. Unstoppable now. The two men I had called moved silently, deliberately, each step measured, each action subtle but purposeful. Their presence alone was enough to make Ethan freeze. He had no idea who they were at first, only that they carried authority, precision, and inevitability. The fear in his eyes grew as he realized that the situation was no longer under his control. Every thought he had of escaping or deflecting responsibility vanished in the presence of undeniable evidence and silent enforcers of consequences. "I don't understand," he whispered, voice cracking, shaking his head. "Dad, you can't, this isn't right." I leaned back in my chair, watching him, patient, quiet, letting him crumble under the weight of what he had ignored for so long. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to demand anything. The truth was enough. The consequences were enough. The combination of what he had done, what he had dismissed, and what he had underestimated created a force far greater than his arrogance could resist. He stumbled to the couch, collapsing into it as if the weight of everything had suddenly become physical. He buried his face in his hands, shaking, realizing that the world he had built on entitlement and dismissiveness had collapsed in an instant. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated the subtle power of patience, the quiet force of preparation, the relentless clarity of truth. The footage continued to play. Every scene, every image, every snippet of conversation pressed down on him. He realized finally that calling something junk could set in motion events he could not undo. Every moment he had treated others carelessly, every time he had laughed at someone's expense, every time he had assumed I was powerless, it all came back to him now. And he knew it. He turned toward me, tears welling in his eyes, panic etched across his features. "Dad, please. I can fix this. I'll make it right. Please don't show anyone." I remained calm, silent, watching the culmination of years of recklessness crash into him. I let the moment stretch, letting him feel every ounce of vulnerability, every pang of regret, every flicker of fear. The lesson was not just in what had happened. The lesson was in understanding that his own choices had led him here, that arrogance and carelessness always carry consequences, and that sometimes silence and preparation are the most powerful weapons. The two men I had called moved closer, subtly presenting documents, evidence, and corroboration of the moments on the memory card. Ethan's hands shook, his face pale, his words now stammering, almost incoherent. He was begging, pleading for mercy, pleading for forgiveness, pleading for a chance to undo what could not be undone. And in that moment, I felt the quiet satisfaction of seeing someone who thought themselves untouchable, finally confronted with the truth they had ignored for years. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the laptop. Ethan's frantic breaths filled the space, his body tense, trembling, as he realized he had no escape. And then, slowly, deliberately, I spoke, my voice calm but deliberate, carrying the weight of inevitability. "You wanted to call it junk, Ethan. You thought it meant nothing. But sometimes the things we dismiss carry the heaviest lessons." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting between me, the men, and the screen. And in that moment, I knew the reckoning was complete in its first phase. He was finally beginning to understand that arrogance, carelessness, and disrespect are never without consequence. The storm was far from over, but the foundation had been set. And Ethan, my son, would remember this day forever, not as a joke, not as a lesson he could ignore, but as a moment when the truth he had refused to face came crashing down around him. The day had come. Every moment, every calculation, every careful step I had taken led to this final stage. Ethan sat across from me, pale, shaking, his eyes wide and searching for any escape. The weight of what he had done, the arrogance he had carried, the careless words he had thrown around, they all caught up with him at once. He realized now fully that he had underestimated me, that the old man he had mocked had quietly set the stage for his reckoning. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I simply let the tension fill the room. He tried to speak, tried to deflect, tried to find some defense, but the words stuck in his throat. The memory card, the laptop, the evidence, the men I had called, they all combined into a force that left him powerless. Every moment he had believed he was untouchable, every slight he had inflicted, every careless laugh at someone else's expense, now returned to him, undeniable and irreversible. "Dad, please," he begged, his voice cracking, shaking. "I didn't mean please, I can fix it." I shook my head slowly, letting the silence speak louder than any words I could say. I let him feel the full weight of consequence, the reality that actions ignored or dismissed are never without impact. The two men I had called quietly approached, presenting evidence, documentation, and confirmation of every scene on the memory card. Ethan's face fell further, the panic in his eyes deepening. He had no control, no authority, no way to stop what was already in motion. I leaned back, calm, patient, deliberate. Every calculated step I had taken, the hidden memory card, the careful recordings, the discreet call, was designed to ensure this moment. To ensure he understood, completely, that arrogance and carelessness carry consequences that cannot be undone. He shook his head, words spilling out in desperation. I'll make it right. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll do anything, please. Please don't, but it was too late. The evidence was already moving, quietly, inevitably, out into the world. Every careless word, every act of selfishness, every dismissal of responsibility would be seen. His reputation, his pride, his arrogance, all laid bare. And he knew it. He could feel it, trembling inside him, unstoppable, undeniable. I spoke then, my voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. "You thought this camera was junk, Ethan. You thought it was meaningless. You thought me, your father, was powerless. But sometimes, the smallest things carry the greatest lessons. And sometimes, silence and patience are the strongest form of power." He looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the full scope of realization in his eyes. Panic, guilt, fear, and finally acceptance. He understood in that moment the consequences of arrogance, entitlement, and dismissiveness. He understood that actions ignored, words dismissed, and people underestimated have a way of returning undeniable, unavoidable, and permanent. The men I had called left as quietly as they had arrived. Ethan was alone with me and the evidence. He slumped into a chair, trembling, pale, finally silent. No more words could undo what had been revealed. He understood fully and completely that he had been bested, not by force, not by anger, but by patience, strategy, and undeniable truth. I watched him, calm, silent. My heart did not gloat. It was steady, satisfied, at peace. The lesson had been delivered, the balance restored. The arrogance had been met with undeniable consequence. And for the first time, Ethan saw me not as a powerless old man, but as someone whose patience, preparation, and quiet observation could change everything. After a long pause, he finally whispered, voice trembling, I I understand, Dad. I won't forget this. I nodded once, quietly, letting the moment settle. Sometimes words are unnecessary. Sometimes the realization itself is enough. And in that quiet, heavy room, I knew he had learned the most important lesson of his life. The camera, the memory card, the evidence, they were all just tools. The real lesson was in understanding consequences, respect, and awareness. And as he sat there, humbled, shaken, and fully aware, I realized that this was the true power of patience and strategy. And that's when I realized sometimes silence is the loudest answer. And preparation is the most powerful form of revenge.